The Galactic officers laughed. A small human had entered the council hall, no armor, no weapons, just quiet eyes. The room was full of voices, loud, proud, and full of jokes. Aliens from different parts of the galaxy sat around the long, silver table inside the Grand Council Hall. The meeting was about Earth. Again, high commanders from 12 star systems were present. The Krell, tall and armored. The Varnax with sharp eyes and skin like stone. Even the mysterious Quora floated silently near the far corner. They had all gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. And then, the door opened. Number 1 expected what walked in. A single human. No guards, no uniform, no visible weapon. Just a man. Average height by Earth standards, but to the council, he looked small. Too small. His name was Eli Ward. The Krell general leaned back, crossed his arms, and let out a loud laugh. This is Earth's representative. I thought humans liked to show off. Where's the armor? Where's the strength? Others joined in. One whispered, he looks like a child. Another said, maybe Earth finally gave up. But Eli said nothing. He simply walked forward and stood at the center of the room. His face showed no fear, no pride, just calm. Someone from the council spoke. State your name and purpose. Still quiet, Eli slowly looked around the room. His eyes met every alien leader. Some stared back with challenge, others with boredom. No one felt worried. Not yet. Finally, in a voice low and steady, he spoke. My name is Eli Ward. I speak for Earth. The council waited for more, but Eli said nothing else. His silence lasted long enough that the Varnax delegate leaned forward and said, is that it? That's all you bring? Eli blinked. I was listening. That answer made a few snort. The Krell general stood, his boots echoing across the floor. You were listening? What for? You think you're here to learn? Eli didn't move. No, I'm here to remember who laughed. The room fell quiet for a moment, then burst into more laughter. The kind of laugh that fills space when no one takes you seriously. But something had changed. It wasn't the air. It wasn't the light. It was Eli's eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't glowing. But something behind them shifted. It felt like gravity changed, just for a moment. The Quora delegate, who hadn't spoken once, tilted its head. Its voice was barely a whisper. I felt that. The Krell general rolled his eyes. He's doing nothing. It's just a trick. Another counselor motioned to the guards. Escort him out. We've wasted enough time. 2 alien guards stepped forward, trained, strong. But as they moved closer, their steps slowed, then stopped. Their arms began to tremble. Eli didn't raise a hand. He didn't even look at them. Both guards dropped to the ground, not hurt, not harmed, just ... still. Now the room was no longer laughing. One of the leaders whispered, what did he do? Eli turned slowly, facing the entire council. His voice remained calm. I stood here quietly. You showed me who you are. Now you'll see who we are. The council began to realize something was wrong. Not because Eli attacked, not because he threatened, but because they didn't know what he was doing. And that was the true danger. Every species in that room had studied humans, their muscles, their technology, their wars, but they had never studied their silence. And now, one silent man had changed the entire tone of the room. A soft hum began to rise from something small in Eli's coat pocket. Round, metal, not glowing but awake. No one moved. No one dared. Eli reached into his coat and placed the small sphere gently on the table. It hovered slightly above the surface. The hum grew louder, not painful, just deep, deep enough to feel in the bones. He looked up. You laughed at our size, at our words, at our peace. You thought small meant weak, but small things survive by knowing when to act and when not to. His words were soft, no drama, no shouting, but somehow they felt heavier than any weapon. One delegate tried to speak but stopped. His mouth wouldn't move, not frozen, just unsure. Eli stepped away from the sphere and stood still once more. If you came here to test Earth, then understand this: you already failed. You judged us by what you could see, and we never showed you the rest. The council sat in complete silence now. No jokes, no orders, no motion, just a small human, and a room full of power, that no longer felt in control. And as the camera fades, the last sound is Eli's quiet voice, repeating one line, I was listening. Then nothing. They all sat frozen, eyes fixed on the small sphere still hovering above the center table. It didn't blink or flash. It didn't spin or shake. And yet, no one dared speak. The air inside the council hall felt heavier now. It wasn't heat or gravity. It was something else. Something none of them could explain. The silence wasn't just around them. It had entered them. The kind of silence that felt like a warning. Eli Ward stood quietly, his hands behind his back, watching. His breathing was steady, his face calm. He was not tall. He wore no armor. Yet the entire council, beings from galaxies known for strength, speed, and superior minds, remained silent in front of him. The Krell general, once loud and full of pride, now stayed seated, hands gripping the sides of his chair. The Quara, who once floated peacefully in the shadows, now shifted slightly, glowing with a cautious light. The Varnax didn't blink once. No one could explain what had just happened with the guards. Two of the strongest species in the galaxy had stepped forward to remove Eli, and had collapsed mid-step, but they weren't unconscious. They were still breathing, their eyes open, looking confused as if they didn't know how or why their bodies stopped responding. Someone finally spoke, a thin voice, from one of the lower counselors. What are you? Eli didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room again, slower this time, as if reading something only he could see. I am human, he said simply. That is enough. But what did you do? Another voice asked, quieter now, without the boldness from before. I didn't do anything, Eli replied. I allowed the silence to reach you. Confused glances passed between the members of the council. These were leaders who had traveled through wormholes, commanded fleets, ruled over planets, yet none of them understood this man. His words were clear, his tone calm, but nothing made sense anymore. One delegate tried to stand. His knees shook slightly. Is this some form of control technology? Some gravity device? Is the sphere the source? Eli looked at the sphere. It's not a weapon. It's a message. A message from who? From Earth, Eli said. From those who watched in silence while you measured us, mocked us, judged us by shape and sound. He took a step toward the sphere, but didn't touch it. It moved slightly on its own, responding as if it knew his presence. You came to Earth once, he continued, not with ships, but with laws. You gave us rules, limits. You told us where to grow and where to stop, and you watched to see if we would rise or fade. You laughed when we took the quiet path. You didn't notice we took every path you ignored. A few in the council began checking their data devices. Quiet alerts flashed, unusual signals, communications delayed, a few networks not responding. A thin sense of unease spread. You spread across the stars with loud machines and bright banners. Eli said, we walked softly, we planted seeds, we learned languages, and we listened. The counselor from the Krell rose slowly. If you are trying to show us fear, it won't work. We've faced many strong species. I'm not here to show fear, Eli answered. I'm here to show understanding. You think strength is loud. We learned that real power often has no sound. The lights dimmed, just slightly. The room's main screen activated without command. A star map appeared, bright dots connected with thin lines. Every system where humans had quietly reached. Dozens, hundreds, far more than anyone had guessed. This ... This cannot be real, one delegate whispered. You never checked beneath your feet, Eli said. You only looked up. The map zoomed in to show places where humans had lived in peace for decades. Even centuries undected, no wars, no warnings. Just quiet study, quiet learning. The Varnax delegate leaned forward, voice low and uncertain. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked, Eli replied. You assumed, you compared, you never listened. Another voice asked, and now, what is it you want from us? Eli stepped away from the sphere again and turned his back to the council. Nothing. That word stayed in the air longer than expected. You've already taken what you wanted. Control, judgment, space. But you never took the time to understand who we were. Now, you've seen a little of it. The council hall was silent again. Not from fear, not from surprise, but from a quiet realization that the human standing before them was not alone. He never had been. And then, just as calmly as he arrived, Eli walked toward the exit. As the doors opened, he paused and turned his head slightly. The room was never quiet because you controlled it. It was quiet because we let it be. And then, he walked out, leaving behind only a still sphere, a silent council, and a galaxy that had just started to realize what it missed. The corridor outside the council hall was cold and silent, but Eli Ward walked with the same calm steps as before. His face showed no rush, no worry. The doors behind him slowly shut, sealing the highest leaders of 12 star systems in silence. Leaders who had once believed they understood everything about Earth, but they didn't tell until, and Eli knew they never really tried. As he walked through the empty halls of the Galactic Spire, lights dimmed slightly with each step, not as a warning but in quiet recognition. There was no one around him, but he wasn't alone, not really. Small invisible signals bounced softly off the walls. The entire place had been designed to protect the council, but none of it had been designed to watch someone like him, not because he was dangerous, but because people like him weren't supposed to exist. Far above him, in the silent skies over the council planet, hidden probes turned ever so slightly. Their sensors were not known to any galactic government. They didn't beam down weapons. They didn't broadcast warnings. They just listened like Eli did. Far below, in the lower levels of the city, a quiet group of humans sat around data consoles. No noise, no orders, just focused observation. These were not soldiers. These were pattern readers, listeners, shadow engineers. They had been stationed on this world for 40 years. The council never knew, and now, the time to be silent was ending. Eli stopped by a window. The city spread wide under the night sky. Lights blinked softly on towers and gliding transport ships. It all looked peaceful, structured, civilized, but it wasn't balanced. It was control. Eli could feel it in the way everything moved too perfectly, like a song written only to impress, not to speak truth. He remembered the training halls back on Earth, not made of metal and light, but stone, wind, and long empty rooms. No one shouted there, no alarms rang, yet everything important was learned inside them. It wasn't Earth's technology that made people like him. It was Earth's silence. They had built something long ago, a project no one in the galaxy knew about. It had no name that could be spoken, no fleet, no symbol, but its design was simple. If the galaxy pushes us, let them. If they mock us, let them. If they forget us, better still. And when the time comes, we will rise quietly, not in war, in knowing. Back inside the council hall, the sphere on the table remained perfectly still. A few dared to stand now, moving slowly, still unsure if it was safe. One counselor tried scanning it, but their device gave nothing back. Not blocked, just blank. Why can't I read it? One asked. Another replied, because it's not broadcasting, it's listening. And it was. The sphere didn't send power. It took in the room, the voices, the energy, the structure. Every law of physics present was being quietly understood and recorded. Not for attack, but for a translation. Eli had left it behind for a reason. It was a message that would keep listening even after he walked away, because Earth's greatest strength was not what it showed, but what it understood when others thought it was doing nothing. At that same moment, across the galaxy, hundreds of similar spheres blinked once, not to be noticed but to quietly confirm. The council had finally seen. Back on Earth, hidden under layers of ocean and ice, an old chamber came to life. Walls lit up slowly, revealing lines of humans in deep stillness. They weren't sleeping, they were waiting. A quiet signal arrived, no alarm, just 3 words. Stage 1, heard. And the lights grew brighter, in another part of the galaxy. Inside a moon that didn't exist on any star map, a strange structure rotated. It was not large, it had no weapons, but it pulsed with thought. Inside, no one moved but data flowed like breath. Human minds, trained beyond limits, linked quietly through neural space. They had watched the council for years. Every policy, every bias, every joke. Not to fight, to prepare. The galaxy had always believed humans were slow to advance, that they needed guidance, but that was only true if you looked at what humans built, not how they thought. Where other species built faster engines, humans built deeper memory. Where others added muscle, humans added patience. Where others bragged of peace, humans trained for silence. And now, that silence had reached the council. Eli stepped into a small transport at the city edge. No guards, no pilot. The ship didn't rise with fire. It lifted quietly, like a feather, caught on still wind. As it rose, his voice came through one last time softly through the sphere. You don't need to fear us, he said, but you do need to understand us, because now, the galaxy will start asking questions. He didn't say what those questions were. He didn't need to, because deep inside, every council member had already started asking them, and none of them liked the answers. And so the sphere remained behind, floating, silent, still listening, watching not for weapons, but for truth. And slowly, very slowly, the galaxy realized Earth had never stopped rising. It had simply stopped speaking. Until now. The stars above the council planet shimmered as if they knew something had changed. Ships moved through orbit. Lights blinked across space. From a distance, everything looked normal. But inside the minds of the most powerful leaders in the galaxy, nothing felt normal anymore. Eli Ward was gone, quietly, without any force or threat. And yet, he had left behind more questions than any fleet of warships ever could. Inside the council hall, the floating sphere still hovered above the center table. It had not moved. It had not made a sound. But its presence grew heavier with every second. The councillors spoke in low voices now, each word weighed down by what they had just seen. "What does Earth want from us?" one whispered. "No demands, no conditions," another replied. "Just silence." It doesn't make sense, but that was the problem. For centuries, the council had measured everything by what could be seen, counted, or controlled. They made laws based on visible power. They ranked species by ship size, military numbers, and voice volume. They never created a scale for silence. They never made space for the invisible. And now, they were living in the middle of it. Eli's last words echoed again and again in their minds. Now the galaxy will start asking questions. But what did that mean? In a hidden lab on the far moon of Akara 7, a Varnak scientist replayed footage of the council meeting. He watched the moment the guards fell, frame by frame, pixel by pixel. Still, no signal, no sound, no visible cause, just ... stillness. He ran the test again, frustrated. There has to be something. Nothing acts without force. But in that moment, the lab lights flickered not from error, but from interruption. His system had been touched by something outside, not hacked, just noticed, and then it stopped. On a jungle-covered planet in the Kellen cluster, a group of young explorers from a dozen different species stood around an old, round object, half buried in the soil. It was metallic, smooth, almost warm. It wasn't marked on any star map. No record of a ship crash, no ruins nearby. One brave explorer touched it. It didn't respond with noise or movement. It simply sent a feeling, a soft, deep echo knot in the air. But in thought, they didn't tell anyone. Somehow, they understood this wasn't something to share. Not yet. Back on the council planet, news had begun to spread. Not officially but slowly, in whispers and personal messages, that a human had stood before the council and caused stillness, that he left behind something ... different. Delegates from minor systems started arriving uninvited, hoping for a glimpse of the sphere. Some believed it was a new kind of Earth technology. Others thought it was only a trick, but no one could deny the change in atmosphere. Even the guards stood straighter now, not out of pride, out of uncertainty. Meanwhile, Eli had not returned to Earth. He hadn't gone home because this wasn't over. He was on a ship without a name, traveling through a path no navigation system showed. It followed pulses only humans could feel, ripples created long ago, through thought and quiet design. As the stars moved outside his window, Eli closed his eyes. He remembered the day he was chosen. It wasn't a ceremony. No flags, no cheers. Just an old man sitting across from him in a stone hall on Earth, saying, "You will speak only when they forget how to listen." He had trained for years, not in how to fight, but in how to observe. How to measure a room by silence. How to know when to step forward, ... and when to wait. And above all, how to remain unnoticed until it mattered most. On board his ship, a small device lit up. A message came in, made of simple lines and data points. Human colonies across 7 systems had reported the same thing. Quiet spheres had been found, not placed, not delivered, found as if they had always been there. Some in oceans, some deep in mountain ice, some inside moons believed to be empty. They had been waiting for this moment. Eli tapped a soft command into the device, not to send orders, just confirmation. The Earth network did not run on command structures. It ran on understanding, the kind that doesn't need to shout. On the council planet, The floating sphere suddenly blinked once, soft, gentle, like the closing of an eye. No noise, just acknowledgement, and then something unexpected. The sphere moved, not fast, not aggressive. It floated slowly across the table, then toward the wall, where it stopped, hovered, and turned itself toward the council. A soft image projected into the air. Not a map, not a threat, a memory. It showed Earth, not cities or armies, just forests, oceans, children learning under open skies, elders sitting under trees, people walking not with fear, but with direction. And then it faded. The council didn't speak, because now they understood what the message was. It wasn't about power, it was about presence, about what humanity had become while everyone else wasn't paying attention. The leaders looked at one another. For the first time, they asked not, "What should we do?" but "What have we missed?" Outside the hall, the wind moved across the towers of the city. Lights still blinked, ships still flew, but everything felt different, because now, the galaxy knew, humanity had not been waiting for permission to rise. They had already risen, quietly. The council hall felt larger now, not because it had grown, but because something unseen had taken root inside it, something heavier than fear and deeper than confusion. It was the weight of realization. For the first time in generations, the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy found themselves not in control, but in reflection. No alarms had gone off, no fleets appeared in orbit, no official statement had come from Earth. And yet, every member of the council knew something had changed. The small human who once stood silently before them had revealed nothing, but left behind everything. The sphere, still drifting slowly along the edge of the room, had done more than show a memory of Earth. It had awakened a thought in each of them. If this was what they showed us, what have they kept hidden, far beyond the council planet, in the quiet corners of the galaxy where old signals faded and records were thin? Pieces began to move. On a planet once considered uninhabitable, scanners detected small pulses, too soft to be technology, too consistent to be nature. A Quarren science team approached, believing it to be a geological anomaly. But what they found was no rock, no ruin. It was a door, and it opened inward, as if it had been waiting for someone to notice. Inside, glowing lines marked the floor, shapes neither alien nor mechanical. In the center, a human emblem no species had ever seen before. They left, silently. Elsewhere, on a diplomatic station in orbit around the twin moons of Vexa Prime, an analyst reviewed old sensor data from the past 50 years. While comparing distant trade logs, she discovered something strange. Ship I, discoded with Earth origin, had appeared in dozens of systems, long before humans were officially allowed to travel there. Each time they had arrived quietly, never in fleets, always with small crews. But the real surprise was what they left behind: clean water systems, improved food growth, forgotten language scripts restored, no flags, no signs, just solutions. These humans didn't announce themselves. They didn't build monuments. They simply helped, then disappeared. The analyst didn't report it. She wasn't sure why, but something in her heart told her, this isn't a threat, this is something else. Back on Earth, deep beneath the quiet northern plains, a vast chamber stirred to life. It wasn't made of steel. It was grown carefully, from ancient Earth tech, mixed with something older, something organic. It pulsed, now, slowly, as data flowed into its core from all across the stars. Inside, human minds linked by neural light watched, not for enemies, but for understanding. Their job wasn't to respond with force. It was to observe what the galaxy did next. Would they rush to prepare weapons? Would they retreat behind old fears? Or would they finally begin to listen? At the edge of the Milky Way, a hidden satellite recorded a council transmission, a quiet one. No official crest, no command, just a voice. It belonged to a minor council member from the Orani species. We were wrong. Earth was never behind. We just never looked in the right direction. The transmission didn't ask for peace or alliance. It didn't ask for help. It simply said, we want to know more. The message was recorded, saved, but Earth didn't respond. Not yet, because Earth didn't rush answers. They watched how questions were asked. On board Eli Ward's ship, floating beyond the known space routes, a soft alert blinked on his console. Not an emergency, a confirmation. The human network scattered across dozens of systems was awakening. All at once. Not all at once, with intent, Each hidden station began syncing data, stories from planets where humans had helped rebuild after disasters, civilizations saved without knowing who saved them, entire species who spoke dead languages, until a quiet human appeared with forgotten knowledge, and then left. The pattern had always been there, but no one saw it, not even the council, because they never looked at the smallest movements. They only looked at loud ones. In a distant observatory, an alien astronomer watched the stars for signs of expansions, something the council always used to measure progress. But now, he realized something unsettling. Human ships weren't expanding outward, they were moving inward, quietly connecting systems, not with ships, but with understanding. He turned off his console and stared out the window. Maybe progress wasn't about speed or size anymore. Maybe it was about reach. And maybe humans had already reached everyone. Silently. Back in the council hall, the sphere finally powered down. It didn't fall, it simply stopped glowing, floating silently, like it had delivered its final thought. But before the silence returned fully, it whispered one final message, through the room, not through sound, but through thought. You believed Earth was behind, but we never followed you. We followed something deeper. The council didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Because deep down, they understood now, Earth's real strength had never been its armies, its weapons, or its size. It was its patience. It was the ability to grow in places no one watched. And it was the understanding that sometimes the loudest message is sent without words, and far beyond their vision, in places hidden not by shields but by silence. Earth's network waited. Not for battle, for questions. It began with a silence deeper than before. Not the silence of fear, not the silence after shock, but something even more powerful, a silence filled with questions. Across the galaxy, in council halls, research stations, hidden command rooms, and ordinary homes, minds were turning, and at the center of it all was Earth, or rather, what Earth had become. No news announcements came, no new human envoys appeared. At any port, there were no battles, no treaties, and no requests. But across hundreds of systems, people were beginning to notice something strange. Humans were everywhere, not in force but in presence, not controlling but connected. On the farming moon of Yellen 3, a farmer realized that the water systems that had doubled their crop yield last season were designed by someone they never officially hired. In the deep libraries of Ront, forgotten language suddenly had a full translation index uploaded to the universal net, no author listed. But the format matched Earth pattern codes. No one knew when these things had happened. They'd just appeared, quietly. And now that people were looking, more examples came to light. On industrial planets, old, unstable mining drones had been silently replaced with more efficient, safe designs, ones only a few engineers recognized as human. On remote colonies near the spiral edge of the galaxy, emergency medical systems showed software updates that had saved lives, but Earth had never taken credit. It was like someone had been walking through the galaxy in shadows, gently, fixing the broken things. But now, the shadows were becoming visible. In the council hall, the leaders met again, but this time, the atmosphere was different. No jokes, no loud voices, no underestimation. For the first time in years, they weren't here to debate Earth's place. They were here to understand it. The floating sphere Eli left behind had not spoken since it showed them that vision of Earth, but it still hovered, still listened, and somehow, that was enough to make them feel like they were being watched, not with threat, but with awareness. Counselor Dren from the Krell spoke first. We made a mistake. We looked at Earth through the lens of control. We thought if they weren't loud, they weren't strong. Counselor Frell of the Varnex leaned forward. It wasn't just that. We trained ourselves to think presence must be visible. That silence means absence. But humans... They turned silence into structure. The Quora, glowing softly at the edge of the room, finally spoke. They were never behind. They were never lost. We were simply looking in the wrong direction. And that was the truth none of them wanted to face. Earth had not just caught up. It had already arrived on its own path, in its own time, through its own quiet wisdom. Back in deep space, Eli Ward stood again on the deck of his ship. He wasn't alone this time. Beside him were representatives from dozens of human listening posts across the stars. Young, old, quiet, thoughtful. None wore ranks. None carried titles, but all understood what was happening. Eli looked at the signal blinking slowly on the central screen. It wasn't a call from the council. It was from someone else, a world on the outer rim. Unknown, small, but their message was clear. We've seen what you've done. We want to learn. It wasn't a call for help. It was something more honest, a call for connection. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes and remembered how the quiet path began. Years ago, after Earth had been told by the Council that it was unfit for full galactic participation, something unexpected happened. The people didn't protest. The leaders didn't argue. Instead, Earth turned inward not to hide, but to grow. They studied. They explored the smallest things, emotions, memory, pattern. They trained people not just to speak or fight, but to notice. Not to build bigger ships, but deeper systems. Not to reach faster, but more meaningfully. It had taken generations, but they had reached a place no one expected. A presence so gentle, it went unnoticed. A presence so thoughtful, it could not be denied. Now, that presence was waking the galaxy. On worlds once uninterested in human life, new cultural centers began asking for human historians to visit. Not for war stories, but for memory, for understanding. They didn't want Earth's weapons, they wanted Earth's silence, Earth's listening. The galaxy was learning something new, that maybe the loudest empires don't last, but the quiet ones, the ones that walk softly, with patience and presence, they shape everything, slowly, deeply, without noise. Back on Earth, an elder stood at the edge of a vast garden beneath a sky filled with stars. Young students gathered around, and one asked, "Did we win?" The elder smiled softly. "There was never a war." "Then what was it?" "A misunderstanding," he said, watching the stars blink. "They thought silence meant we had nothing to say. We just waited ... until they were ready to hear." And as that same sky spread over thousands of worlds, the quiet work of humans continued, not to rule, but to restore, not to conquer, but to connect. And now the galaxy, once proud and loud, finally paused long enough to hear them, not through power, not through sound, but through presence. Earth had moved quietly, but now, the silence was the story.